Mary Ellen O'Toole is a former FBI profiler. Mary, you know, we've seen a lot of these lone wolf sort of situations, but this is very different. Given your background, what can you tell us about this attack and about the suspects involved?
Sure. Understanding the behavior is very important in a crime like this. And in what's being described are snipers up on a building that are basically hunting. It's called predatory behavior, but it's hunting behavior. They're hunting their victims. And that's a very specific kind of violence that we saw in the FBI and the profiling unit. That violence is called, technically it's called instrumental violence, but what that means is that it is cold-blooded, it is well planned out, it is very strategic, and it's very purposeful, and it tends to be the violence that's preferred by individuals who are psychopathic. We have a lot of research to back that up, and psychopath is the new term for a sociopath. So that in itself is very telling to me, just that kind of hunting behavior. Violence is not created equal, and that's a very unique kind of violence. And in fact, it's not that dissimilar, at least from what's being described right now. That kind of picking off of your victim from atop of a building is not that dissimilar from what we saw back in 1966 at the University of Texas by Charles Whitman. So we see lone wolves, you know, we see serial killers, and we see mass murders, but that's a very specific kind of violence, and it goes to the shooter's personality, at least one of those shooters' personalities.
Right. So that's the thing. We know, or we suspect at least, that the 4 people were involved here. So this is at least a 4-person conspiracy. What about the dynamics of how that might work? What's the likelihood of 4 people coming together that are like-minded in this way?
Well, 4 people can come together, but you have generally you're going to have one person that's the leader, and that would tend to be the person that is psychopathic, because they tend to be very grandiose people, and they don't want other people in their little group to compete with them. So he would probably tend to be the leader. It's well planned out, so they thought about it ahead of time, but this could have been the perfect storm for them, knowing that police officers would be congregated in a certain location. But the thing about people like this, the psychopathic individual, they tend to be very glib and charming people in real life when they're around other people. So they can draw other people to them. They can be very mesmerizing individuals. So it's not surprising that you have a small group of people that could have been co-opted by the leader of this group of 2 or 3 or 4 people. But a psychopathic individual is extremely dangerous, especially if it's someone who's, you know, is involved with this kind of behavior, homicidal behavior.
How much planning would be involved in this? Would this be something that would take a long time to pull together?
Well, there is planning. There's probably more practice than there is planning. And clearly this taking advantage of the march that came about fairly spontaneously, right, required that they were able to pull together at the last minute. But make no mistake that there's a lot of practice that went into this, and they were able to take advantage of a last-minute situation. And I think that's pretty important as well, because it does show, when they're able to pull it together this well, just how well trained that they are. Mm-hmm. And it also goes to show that whoever is the leader of this group was able to get the other people to stop everything that they're doing and commit right away to carrying this out so quickly. So again, that goes to the amount of influence that the leader has over the other people who would have been involved.
Can we draw anything from beyond the fact that this sort of psychopathic tendencies, from the fact that they use a sniper's rifle, in terms of the skill level? Do you think law enforcement will be looking for somebody with a military background or a law enforcement background?
They won't rule it out, but it also can be someone who is just very good with weapons and has practiced a lot. But they won't close any doors until they know, until they can really rule that out. So they'll be open to the possibility that it's somebody with military training, somebody with law enforcement training, or just someone who's just well trained on their own. And I think also one thing I think is important to point out, I've heard people talk about the emotion in this crime.
Okay, sure.
at least for the individual who's probably manifesting the psychopathic traits, there's not a lot of emotion in this crime. This is a very cold-blooded and callous crime. So it's not a rageful crime. It's not a lot of anger there. It's a very cold-blooded, callous crime. It's what we call hypo-emotional, which means without emotion. That doesn't mean all the offenders are like that, but at least for the ones, in my opinion, who are probably calling the shots, it's more hypo-emotional without emotion. And that's important to understand.
So then, as we search for a motive, it may not be in an obvious place then.
It may not be, and you may not be expecting to find someone that is, ranting and raving all the time, but someone that's really much more controlled in their affect or in their emotions. Because to be able to, with all that chaos and yelling and screaming, to stand up and very successfully shoot and kill and hold the city of Dallas hostage for all that time, you have to be in control of your emotions. I mean, you have to be very strategic with the firearm. So you can't have somebody that's jumping up and down and yelling and shouting. And this is something that's very consistent with someone who's psychopathic. Emotions are a weakness to them, and they don't have the kinds of emotions that you and I have. Now, I'm not saying that all four or however many are there, we don't know yet, but all four individuals have this personality type. But you have one person in this group who does have that personality type, and it's going to be one of the sharpshooters who was hunting the police officers. Because that hunting behavior, I cannot underscore how unusual that is and how unique that behavior is in this kind of a setting.
Mary Ellen O'Toole, all very interesting stuff, very insightful. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.